Okay, that was a great introduction. I appreciate it, and I want to give a great thanks to Harlan, Dietrich, and everything that the bookstore has done for this community. I also want to start by thanking Mr. G. Edward Griffin. I've had the pleasure of chaperoning him today and last night, and it's been rather humbling to share the stage. It's going to be rather humbling to share the stage with him. It's a great honor. This man has had a wonderful, a very major impact in my development as an activist and my appreciation for freedom, so I thank you. Yeah. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about liberty. What it is and why it should be important to us. It's my hopes to inspire individuals. I see a lot of people in this room. I also want to point out what a great honor it has been to be an activist in Austin with such a wonderful group of people, and it's very, very inspiring to see so many people here tonight. So just for showing up and being active, go and give yourself a round of applause. So I want to talk about how big liberty is and how important the times that we're facing in, and everybody should feel blessed to be alive right now. The times are getting rather tough and very tumultuous, and it's going to get even worse. You can guarantee that. But I'm here to let you know you should be proud, you should feel lucky to be alive and involved at this point, because we really are reaching a turning point. There's going to be two paths we can choose to go down, and it is our choice to make this the future. It's our destiny. We're the ones that decide. One of them can be very dark, very disturbing, basically total slavery, and the other one can be something beautiful. We can finally fulfill the freedom philosophy, the message of freedom. We can fulfill that and actually come up with a genuinely free society. So I want to start by pointing out, while we did fight the American Revolution in 1776, in reality, it's more than just the American Revolution. The way I see it, the big picture of history is ever since the beginning, we have been involved in a long-standing struggle for the emancipation of the sovereign man, ever since the get-go. It was accelerated, of course, with the classical liberal revolutions of the 17th and 18th century. It's a beautiful thing, and again, we have a wonderful opportunity as Americans that we are taking part in that process. And I can guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, the revolution never ended. Rather, it's only just begun. We're reaching another phase, and again, it can go two ways. One, back towards slavery, back towards the old order, which I'm going to speak about. Or we can finally fulfill and embrace our inherent right to be free as free men on this free land. So I want to point out the dichotomy between then and now. Back in the day, there existed what's called the Old Order. In France, before the French Revolution, they called it the Ancien Regime. And basically, the Old Order was one of stagnation, desperation, and despair. The individuals, the subjects at that time, basically, there was no inevitability about the overthrow of the old order. They didn't know what it was to be free. There was no freedom. There was no liberty. There was only tyranny. And these individuals basically just existed in that state. They didn't know anything better than that, so they just existed. There was very much despair, again, because there was no inevitability about the overthrow of that old order, the overthrow of tyranny and the freedom that we enjoy today. Even going before that, a lot of that derived from the divine right of kings, and that there was no dissent. You couldn't speak out against the government. Going all the way back to the Egyptian empire, back in those days, the state and the emperor, the pharaoh, was God. You know, Osiris was the god of the underworld, the god of the afterlife. So if you questioned the state at that point, basically you did it because you'd be doomed to an eternity of pain and torture and hell. So you didn't question the state. So when you think about it, we've really come a long way since those times. Even after the Egyptian empire, for the serfdom, the feudalism, the Dark Ages and whatnot, they still had the divine right of kings. The king basically stated that he derived his authority from God. And therefore, if you go against the state, if you speak out against the state, you're basically speaking out against God. And in many ways, nobody would do it. It just wouldn't happen. These classical liberal ideals of decentralization, equality under the law, self-ownership, property ownership, they basically didn't exist. We had a feudalist society, a class where basically there was the small privileged class, the nobility, the monarchy, and then there was everybody else. And this nobility, this monarchy, was about 2% of the population. So again, we've really come a long way. I think it's worth noting that the original class structure, opposite of what Marx would say is the property owners and the owners of the industry and whatnot, and then the workers. Before that, it was actually the privileged class, those that are privileged by the state, and then everybody else. So it's interesting to see how that's kind of evolved away from that, and I think that's something that we need to focus on again. There's individuals in this world that are using the coercive power of the state to their own ends, and since the state is parasitic in nature, it exists only because it takes property from us. It inevitably will hurt each one of us. So again, we've come quite a long way, and one of those big steps was property ownership. Before man couldn't own property, he was stuck in this system, he was stuck in the paradigm. But as the beauty of property ownership started to come about, it started with the Magna Carta actually, people started to actually recognize that the king did not have the divine right that they claimed to. But again, this recognition of property rights was only delegated to the nobility and to the lords. So again, there's a whole 98% of the population that still basically existed in a system of slavery. So again, everybody's got to realize how far we've come since that point. That was the existence. That was the paradigm. And there was no inevitability about its overthrow. So we have come a very long way. Along with the other recognitions of natural rights, it's a slow, gradual process. Along with the Magna Carta, emerged the ideals of classical liberalism and the ideas of higher law, of natural law, law that existed outside of just the king says it so it is. And a lot of that started, of course, with the Greeks, with the Greek philosophers, with Aristotle, this idea of higher law. But unfortunately, it got stashed away during the Dark Ages and whatnot, and it later was refounded and came out again during the classical liberal days and the Enlightenment period. And one of the individuals that espoused this classical liberal philosophy so well and was able to disseminate it and get those ideas out there. So these people that lived their life as slaves began being exposed to this idea that, wait a second, I'm a man, I'm inherently free based on my free will, based on nature, based on God, whatever it be. They started to realize these ideas because a gentleman by the name of John Locke in 1690 put out the Second Treatise on Civil Government. And in this he wrote, "The natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth, and not to be under the will or legislative authority of man, but to have only the law of nature for his rule. The liberty of man in society is to be under no other legislative power, but that established by consent in the commonwealth, nor under the dominion of any will or restraint of any law, but that the legislative shall enact according to the trust put in it." This is where we get the idea of governments deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is a very radical and revolutionary idea, and some may say John Locke originally intended it again to be the nobility and the elite at the time, but as those ideas start to get out there, the people start to grasp on and say, wait a second, slavery, it's not such a good thing. So that went on, and those ideas started spreading and spreading and spreading till they reached a point where the people were ready to stand up and to fight for that freedom. And that's where we had the wonderful revolutions of the 17th and 18th century, starting with the English Civil War, moving on to the American Revolution and the French Revolution as well. And I think that was a major accelerating point in this grand picture, this grand struggle for the emancipation of free man was these classical liberal revolutions. And the one that we're most familiar with, of course, is the American Revolution. Now, what we got from that American Revolution was the Declaration of Independence, which is a very beautiful document. And again, that was some very radical and revolutionary stuff, the Declaration of Independence, just the very idea that government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. Again, check the dichotomy, the difference. Whereas before, nobody even questioned, nobody even knew what it was to be free in the least bit. They basically just lived, eked out their life as slaves, not owning property, living in order to appease the king. And then all of a sudden we have this Declaration of Independence, and we put it to paper. You could bet your bottom dollar that our founding fathers struggled with it. They knew, many of them, except for maybe Sam Adams, they knew what it was that they were doing, and they saw how difficult it was. So I urge you, as you're going forward with this activism, a lot of people are putting a lot at risk whenever they get out there and basically face the beast head on.